מזמור לדוד. אדוני רואי לו אחסר, בנודה שירביצני, על מי מנוחות ינהלני. נפשי שובב ינחני, ומגלי צדק למען שמו. גם כי אלך בגיא צל מוות, לא אירא רע כי אתה עמדי. שבטך ומשענתך המה ינחמוני. תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי. תשעת ושמן ראשי, כוסי רוויה. אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימי.
Kol omer kra v'amar ma'ikra, kol habasar chatzir, v'chol chasto ketzitz hasadeh. Yavesh chatzir novel tzitz ki ruach Adonai nashva bo. A voice says, cry out. But I ask, what shall I cry? All flesh is like grass, and all of its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, and the flower fades when a wind from God blows upon it. Surely, therefore, people are like grass. The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of God endures forever. LeDavid mizmor l'Adonai haaretz umloa, tevel v'yoshveva, ki hu al yamim yesada v'al nahor dechoneha. Mi ya'aleh bahar Adonai, umi yakum bimkom kadsho, neki chapayim uvar levav, asher lo nasa lashav nafshi v'lo nishba lamirma. The earth is the Lord's, with all of its fullness. The world is the Lord's, with all of its inhabitants. Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in the holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. He will receive a blessing from the Lord and a just reward from the God of deliverance. To Barbara and to Matt, to the family and friends, I know that there was one thing that people would say to you, Matt, over and over again during these years you've been practicing law when they met you, and you knew always where their comment was coming from. You knew what they meant. They would simply say, are you related to Howard? And you knew that it wasn't small talk, and you knew it wasn't a pro forma type of question. It was the supreme compliment. And you knew that whenever anybody would say that. Are you related to Howard conjured up in their minds a man who was principled, a man who was passionate, a man who was ready to fight the good fight for the great causes of our time, a man who simply couldn't and wouldn't tolerate moments of bias, moments of prejudice, moments of discrimination, moments when one party would try to hold themselves above someone else. In other words, your husband, your father, always tried to fight for the good guys, so to speak. And if that made them think of him and looked at you, that you took it as the great compliment that it was. Now, the Jewish way of saying this is that every human being is created in the image of God. That's how we talk about this idea that everybody has a certain amount of dignity. We're all created in the image of God. And I think your father believed that everyone deserved a chance, that everyone deserved an equal chance, and that no one should lord it over another. He not only believed it, listen, there are a lot of people who believe it, but what set your dad apart was that he was willing to stand up and get active and fight for it. He was a person who both believed in this and was ready to be counted and work for it. I think that's what people meant when they said to you, are you related to Howard? And you took it for what it was intended. Barbara, your husband was a good orator in court. He was thorough. He dotted every I, and he crossed every T. You saw his passion. He had a passion to protect individual rights. He could be stubborn. He was opinionated. He was confident in himself and with a playful sense of humor. Other people have small talk. Other people can schmooze on many topics, but Howard wanted to talk about the law. He would small talk, but his small talk always ended up with legal citations. He wanted, the Hebrew word's tachlis. Tachlis means substance, not fluff. Let's talk about the real substance. He loved real-life interaction about these issues. He had a sobering view of the world, no blissful naivete. He knew how the world worked. What he needed and what he found and who he found was someone who would give his life a little color and a little brightness and a little beauty and a little love, and that was you, Barbara. He needed someone like you in his life. You were exactly what he needed. You certainly were focused in your own right on the important issues of the day. You didn't soft pedal the problems of today, but somehow you gave it a lighter touch that he needed. You opened him up a bit. You exposed him to more of the world. And he and you had a wonderful and supportive relationship for these, we were counting them together, 46 years. He was responsive to you always. He always had a smile on his face for you. He had been a teacher in the law school that you were attending, a very popular teacher. He taught constitutional law and legal ethics, and he enjoyed teaching. And when you met, you saw him as a polite and thoughtful young man, very reliable, very dependable, trustworthy. You were able to overlook his inferior taste in music, right? And still you married him. And you knew he had integrity. You knew he would work on something until he reached the goal. And you and he built a world together. You built a life together, and you two groomed another lawyer. It's not an accident that Howard always had a pen in his pocket and maybe a yellow legal pad not far away, because he was often in the middle of his plan, of his thoughts, of his strategy to help the individual, to help the working man. He was really at his core a caregiver and a gentleman and a chivalrous man. And at his core, he simply didn't like the idea of anyone being mistreated. He himself had learned about the importance of civil rights and liberties from his childhood. His parents thought this way. He was raised with his brother. His parents took strong views on the need for vigilance when it comes to civil rights. Howard loved history, had thought of becoming a history professor at one time. Instead, he witnessed and participated in history. The Terry versus Ohio case that was argued all the way to the Supreme Court, that was history. He was involved in preventing the Strongsville School District from prohibiting certain books off the library shelves. He was counseled Carl Stokes when Carl Stokes was mayor of Cleveland. He did a lot of anti-discrimination work throughout his career. He served as chapter president of the ACLU and the County Bar Association. Whatever his accomplishments were in the world of ideas, his emphasis were on ideas but also on people. He knew that each of his cases affected real people and the rights of real people. People mattered to him. Barbara, you mattered to him as you both pursued your careers, as you both supported each other. Matt, seeing you grow and take up the cause, that mattered to him. And he loved to be around friends and family. And that led to his Judaism. He loved being Jewish. He loved being at the synagogue. He was often the loudest singer in the room. You had belonged to Bethanu earlier, and then we enjoyed welcoming you to Park during these recent years. And he liked the sense of tradition. He liked being with the community. And of course, he was over the moon when it came to his grandkids, Sam and Ashton. He loved telling you stories and giving you memories, and Sam loved to take every word in. You know, if the Jewish mission is to improve the world and to fix the world, then that's what Howard did. He was the fixer in the courtroom. I know he was less so the fixer at home. You called him the least mechanically inclined man you'd ever met, right? I think there's an award given. It's called the Besser Award for the least mechanically inclined. He loved history. He read about the Civil War. He loved reading about Churchill. Not only did he read history, he evidently liked to carry around history because I know he had this enormous wallet, right? He never threw anything away. He kept expired credit cards. I'm not sure why you do that. He kept expired credit cards in his wallet. His entire credit history right there. But in truth, it wasn't just his credit history he carried around. And in all seriousness, he carried around a history of some health concerns, but he never let his health concerns stop him from living his life. I know he was diagnosed with cancer when you were just a young boy, Matt, and it was terminal. He was told he was going to die. that he wasn't going to have much time. It affected his jaw, he lost some his salivary glands, but he lived many, many more years. He took the treatment, it was aggressive treatment. It took a great deal out of him. It took a toll on him, but he had a reason to live and to fight, and that he did. Who knows, maybe he learned through his health issues that sometimes the underdog needs a little help. And if you give the underdog a little help, maybe the underdog can win. So Barber, listen, he never converted to better musical tastes. But his voice was heard articulating some of the greatest principles this or any country has ever heard. And he undoubtedly changed lives. He argued at the Supreme Court level. And I know, Matt, you have the name of a Chief Justice in your name, which is a family tradition, as a gesture of respect for the Supreme Court. But you know, in a person's life, the highest court in the land is not the Supreme Court. The highest court in the land are the voices of your peers, and the voices of your friends, and the voices of your family, and your own voice. And when his peers talked about him, they talked about him with great favor as a reliable and respected and honest man. And I know, Barbara, you and Matt would add the words loving and caring to that. And Howard himself knew he had put up the good fight both personally and professionally, and had argued, defended, and advocated for the good guys all of his life. He lived with a good name, and he died with a good name. Matt, you can come up.
Thank you all for being here. My first memory of my dad is my first memory. We were visiting a family friend's farm. I couldn't have been older than 3 or 4. The farm had a little pond on it and a little rowboat on the shore. My mom took me out in the rowboat, and sure enough, being a little boy, as soon as we got out in the middle of the pond, I started crying. And hearing this, my dad came hightailing it across the field towards the pond. I can still see him in my mind hurtling towards me. I'm not sure exactly what his plan was. I was in a boat in the middle of a pond. Maybe he was going to dive in and tug us to shore. We'll never know, because before he reached the edge of the pond, he tripped and broke his toe. That's a big part of the type of person that my dad was. Someone who would rather needlessly break his own toe than see somebody that he cared about suffering. Ashton's saying, "Daddy, sit down." Soon, Ashton. My dad could be a little bit of a worrier. He could be forgetful. He always offered Gail wine with dinner, even when she was very visibly pregnant. And even though she had told him a million times she doesn't drink wine when she isn't pregnant. He was opinionated. He had opinions about everything, and the older he got, the stronger they got. And he was more than a little bit of an oversharer. More than once I cringed when my dad shared some embarrassing health issue with a waiter. But there was not a mean bone in Howard Russell Besser's body. He was kind and thoughtful. He was smart and passionate. He loved to laugh and share stories. He was a gentleman, a man of unquestioned integrity and honor. He was a lifelong learner and a connoisseur of nature, history, especially the Civil War, his beloved New York Times, classical music, the law, good cheese, and great wine. And he loved the people in his life. At his 75th birthday party, I gave a toast to my dad, and I said that when I think about him, I think about service to others. From his early career in the civil rights movement and his work on major constitutional law cases with the ACLU. So the rabbi mentioned Terry. I wasn't going to talk about this. The rabbi mentioned Terry, which is a case, one of the most famous constitutional law cases, which he was co-counsel with Lou Stokes. And my dad tells the story about how after the oral argument, he excitedly, as a young lawyer, went up to Lou Stokes, who had argued the case, and asked him, "How do you think we did?" And deadpan Lou Stokes looked at him and said, "We got Douglas." And that's all they got. They lost 8-1. but my dad kept fighting for the good cause. Later in his career, he spent his time fighting against discrimination in employment. And throughout his entire career, he spent countless hours on the Cuyahoga County Bar, grievance committee, trying to clean up the legal profession. And he shared what he knew with the next generations of lawyers as an adjunct law professor. And both of these latter things I'm incredibly proud to carry on doing in his footsteps. And last but not least, service to his family, through broken toes and otherwise. But service was only half the story for my dad, because, wow, Ashton, that is really distracting. So it was more than just service to others for my dad. It was concern for others. It was genuine concern for people and their well-being. In the house where I grew up, there was a little end table in the upstairs hallway next to his bedroom. And my dad kept some stationery on the table. On the stationery was a quote from Rabbi Hillel, which I know he always tried to live by. It says, "If I am not for myself, who will be for me? If I am only for myself, what am I? If not me, who? If not now, when?" My dad was always for others. He always wanted to know what he could do for them, whether it was big or small. He always put his own well-being after that of others. I know that if he could, he'd be profusely and repeatedly apologizing to each of you for inconveniencing you here today. But that's because he cared about you, he cared about people, he cared about the world around him, and he wanted to make it as good a place as he could. If you knew my dad, you knew that he was disgusted by the current administration. But as a student of history, he knew that we've been through worse as a nation, and he knew that this time will pass. Even still, he just loved to joke with any nurse who asked how he was doing that it depends on whether Donald Trump is still president. Although we agreed on politics, my dad and I didn't always see eye to eye. But that's okay, because I loved and respected him, and he loved and was proud of me. As a little kid, I have great memories of him taking me to the old Richfield Coliseum to watch games, or to the Natural History Museum to see dinosaurs, or just up the street to Drager's for some peppermint ice cream. I have fond memories of all of us going on family vacations. For instance, the one to Maine when I stood up in a canoe and promptly dumped all of us and his expensive new camera in the river. As I grew up, I knew that he took great pride watching me become a lawyer. The second happiest I ever saw him was the day I was sworn into the bar. There we were at the Ohio Theater in Columbus, hundreds of new lawyers, waiting for their turn to go up on stage and get their admission certificate. But my dad couldn't resist, and he got up out of his seat in the audience, walked up to the stage, and when it was my turn to go up the steps, there he was waiting by the side of the stage to shake my hand. As mortified as I was then, I could admit that was a pretty proud day for the Besser family. But it wasn't as proud as the moment I saw him at his happiest, which was September 10th, 2013, when he saw Sammy for the first time. I'll never forget him standing over the bassinet in the hospital room with his hands clasped tightly under his chin, overwhelmed with tears of joy. He was such a proud grandpa. And no matter what else was going on, he and I could always talk about Sam and Ashton. He loved to show Sam bird books. He loved to hear stories about the boys' escapades and all the cute things that they were up to. I really wish that his health had let him spend more quality time with the boys, but the time that they did get, I can already see, was a very real blessing. As the rabbi mentioned, and many of you know, my dad was never supposed to live this long. When I was 6 years old, he was diagnosed with cancer from smoking his stupid cigars, and it was terminal. The doctors told him that he had only a few months to live, and that he should go home and be with his young son. Stubborn as he was, he didn't accept that. He fought as hard and as bravely as anyone ever could, and he beat the odds. I remember the story that he loved to tell about bumping into the radiation technologist decades after he finished his treatment. And my dad described the poor guy as white as a ghost when he saw my dad, absolutely dumbfounded, because there was no medical or scientific or statistical way that my dad possibly could have lived that long. So I know we're all terribly sad today. It's not our toes that are broken, it's our hearts. But my dad would want us to focus not on what we have lost, which is tremendous, but on what he got. He got 33 bonus years. 33 years he did not waste. He got to see me grow up, become a lawyer and a law professor like him. He got to see me get married to Gail, whom he loved like a daughter. He got to meet his 2 grandsons, whom he loved so, so much. And he got an extra 3 decades with my mom, to whom he was hopelessly devoted. We all know that he'd have done anything for her, and that he loved her more than life itself. We got something too. We got a bonus 30 years of Howard Besser. 30 years of his stories, his smile, his lovingly frustrating inability to ever figure out that you don't need to type the time and date into your emails, and his warm-hearted concern for all of us and the world around us. And I know that he'd also want us to focus not on our sorrow, but on each other, both here in this room and outside it. He'd want us to go out there and do our part to make the world a better place, to remember that if we are only for ourselves, who are we? That if not for us, then who? And that if not now, then when? So as we leave here today, for his sake, I ask that you all take his example with you as his legacy. Go out there and do your part, not only for his memory, but for all of us, to make the world a better place. That's what he would have wanted. Just watch out for your toes. I've been practicing law for 14 years, and as the rabbi said, to this day, I am still constantly asked by other lawyers, are you related to Howard Besser? Just last week, as I was standing at the polls on the election, a lawyer came up to me and asked me that. And I said, as I always do, he's my dad. Her response was the same one that I get every single time. I remember him. We worked together on so-and-so. He's such a sweet man. That has always made me proud, and it always will. I am the man that I am because of him. As much as I'm going to miss him terribly, he will always be with me, and he'll always be with each of you. Thank you all for being here to honor my dad, Howard Russell Besser. I love you, Dad.
Let's rise, everybody.
El male rachamim, shochen b'amromim, hametzeh menucha nechona, tachat kanfei השכינה, im kedoshim utehorim, kezohar harakia mazhirim. את נשמת חיים בן משה ופרומה שלח לעולמו. בעל הרחמים יסתירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרו ביצרו החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
May we remember all of the worthy and the righteous deeds that he performed while in the land of the living. God is now his portion. May he rest in peace. And we all say amen. Let's be seated. We want to offer our condolences to the family, to Barbara, to Matt and Gail, Samuel and Ashton. We want to note that we're going to pause in our service right now to allow us to arrange the processional, which will take us to the burial spot at Bet Olam Cemetery. Please remain in your seats for a few moments. The pallbearers, however, should now come forward.